In this lecture, we're going to add the content for our hero, starting with our large pink icon. So if we go back to our code then, within our div for our hero, we want to add another div, and it's this div that's going to be responsible for rendering our icon, so this particular section here. So back in our code then, let's go ahead and add some class names first. Let's go ahead and add a BG white, and we want it to be slightly transparent, so it's going to have a transparency of 30%. Then we want padding on the top and bottom of 8 pixels, so we'll add a PY2. Then we want a padding on the left and right of 16 pixels, so we'll add a PX4. Then we'll have a border radius, so we'll have a rounded extra large, which will give a 12 pixel border radius. And we'll add a text center. And lastly, we'll add, if we take a look at the completed project, this cool little frosting effect here. So to do that in Tailwind CSS is really easy. We just need to add the backdrop blur class, and we need to specify how much of a blur we want. So I'm going to add the medium blur. So I'm going to add backdrop blur MD. So let's save this now. And I know we haven't got any content in this div, but because we've got the padding, we should see the type of effect we are hoping to achieve. So let's refresh in the browser. And it's not that obvious actually, because it's very, very small. So we'll add some content, but it's this small section here that we can see, which is that nice frosting effect where we're going to add our logo now. So back in our code then, let's go ahead and fill out the logo section. Let's add the logo within a div, and we'll add a class of relative for this div because we're going to position our little wave animation. So this animation here, this will be position absolute. So we want it to be positioned absolutely in relatively to this particular div. So within this div then, let's add our image. So the source is assets/images/logo.png. And let's go ahead and specify a width for this of 175. So if we save this now and take a look in the browser, let's give it a refresh. And there we go, we can see we've got our pink logo. So before we move on to the animation, let's go ahead and finish off the logo section, adding our logo label and logo text. And then we're going to also add the little form section as well, because that's a nice easy win before moving on to the waveform animation. So let's go ahead and add the logo label then. Back in our code, underneath this div here, let's go ahead and add another div. So this will be the logo label now. And let's add a class of text 5XL because we want some really large text for this. So this will give a 48 pixel font size, and let's add a font of bold. So then let's go ahead and add our TW colon, and then we want to add a span because we want to change the color of the MF label. So let's go class here, and we want this color to be text sky 900, and let's add the MF label in there. So let's save this and take a look in the browser now. Let's give it a refresh. And there we go, we've got our icon label text. So let's go ahead now then and add our form. So back in our code then, underneath our little frosted section for our icon, let's add another div. And this will be the little form label. So this will be keep me updated with news and promotions. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that text there and just paste it within that div. So keep me updated with news and promotions. We'll add a class here, and we'll add a font of bold, a margin top of 12 pixels, so we'll add MT3, and we'll have a text of small. So let's save this now and take a look in the browser. Let's give it a refresh, and there we go, we've got our form label. So let's go ahead and add the actual form then. So again, we need to add another div underneath the form label. And again, for this div, we're going to add the same spacing. So we'll add a margin top of 3 there. We'll add a display of flex because we want our form elements, or our input and our submit button, to be on the same line horizontally. And then we'll add a gap between those elements of, so this will add an 8 pixel gap. So then the first thing we want to add to the form then is the input, and we'll have a type of email here, a placeholder of email. And if we save this now and take a look in the browser, and hit refresh, we can see that we've got very, very basic styling for our input here. So we want to make sure we add some appropriate styling which matches our project, and we're going to add some nice frosting again to this input, and we're going to change the border color or the outline color whenever we focus in on our input. And as well, I don't know if you can notice here, it's very, very subtle, but the blinking cursor for our input is that nice pink 500 color. So let's go ahead and implement all of those classes then for our input. Let's go ahead and add a class, and we want a rounded border radius of small. We'll add a border and a border white 40. So this will give a slightly transparent white border. We'll add a background white of 30, just like our frosted section for our logo. And then we're going to do exactly the same and add that backdrop blur MD to add the frosting effect. So let's go backdrop blur MD. Let's add a padding of 2 all round. So this will give an 8 pixel padding all round. Let's have a font bold and a text sky 900. And let's add a placeholder zinc 500. So this will be the text color for the placeholder text. And let's add a carrot pink of 500. So this is the very subtle blinking cursor within the input that I mentioned. So this is a pink of 500, that carrot there. In Tailwind, they call it a carrot. I call it a cursor, but in Tailwind, they call it a carrot. So let's go ahead and also add an outline pink of 500. So this outline pink of 500 will only display whenever we focus in on the input. So let's go ahead and save this now and take a look in the browser just to see what we've got. Let's give it a refresh. And there we go. We can see we've got our input here with our pink outline. We have our slight border radius. We have our nice frosted background effect. And if we type in here, we can see we've got the pink carrot or the cursor, and we have our text color of sky 900. So the last thing we need to do now then is add our submit button. So back in our code, let's go ahead and after this input, let's go ahead and add a div. And within this div, let's add the label of subscribe. So let's add some class names then to make this div look more like a button. So first of all, let's add a cursor pointer so our users know that they can actually click on this button. Let's add a rounded small. We want a BG pink of 500. Let's give it a padding on the y-axis, so the top and bottom of 2, and a padding on the left and right, so the x-axis of 4. Let's add a font bold. Let's add a transition colors. So whenever we hover over this, we're going to change the background color. So we'll have that nice transition between our background colors. So let's add that background color then on hover. So let's go hover, BG, sky 900. And let's also add hover, shadow, large. So it looks like it's sort of coming off the page a little bit anytime we hover over the button. So let's save this and take a look in the browser and see what we've got. Let's give it a refresh. And there we go. We can see we have our nice subscribe button. So in the next lecture then, we're going to take a look at creating our little waveform animation. And we're going to do this by creating another custom plugin. So we'll take a look at this in the next lecture.